Welcome back, everybody. Hopefully, keep eating. We don't expect you to eat that fast, so we are going to go into the panel discussion now. And this is a chance for you to hear a little bit more from some folks who have different roles, different experiences in pharmacy. We've got Chase Arms here. You're a fourth year.
Right.
Tell us what you're doing right now. Like, other than, not right now, because we know what you're doing right now, but like...
Working perfect.
You're paying to work, actually.
Yeah, I'm paying to work right now. Well, my situation is I've been working in the independent pharmacy for 5 years now. And I guess more than anything, I kind of looked at the situation. I kept working with this guy and showed him like how committed I was to his business. You know, coming back during spring break, Christmas break, working. And I kind of lucked out in that when the same time that I graduated, we're going to have another pharmacist that is hiring. So I'm just going to step into that role of being pharmacist for like the majority of pharmacists in that business. I'm not going to have any kind of ownership at this point, but he told me there is some option down the road.
Courtney, you've got a couple different experiences you can share with us. So I shouldn't call her Courtney. She's Dr. Nosepan, but she's Courtney to me.
So I started interning at Walgreens my first summer after I started pharmacy school, which I went to a 06 program, so before I was even really in pharmacy school, and went back for my second summer with them just because they were who I was able to get an intern job with. And the previous summer had been guaranteed 40 hours and then was knocked down to 16, and working was something that was important to me. I wanted to get experience and financially needed to get that opportunity, so I just called every pharmacy in the phone book and called a compounding pharmacy, which at that time I had no idea what the word compounding meant. But the guy said, sure, come in, bring your resume in. One of my references, he had graduated from the same school, my alma mater, Ohio Northern, the same year as the guy, so gave him a call, got my foot in the door there, interned there 2 years, and then went to another compounding pharmacy in the Toledo, Ohio area just to get some different experience, see how different pharmacy ran. And then I did a community residency at Ohio State last year at an independent pharmacy called Uptown Pharmacy. They do a lot of clinical services, and then also spent time at our State Pharmacy Association as well. So I've seen a lot of different aspects of independent pharmacy on both sides of the fence.
Great. Randy, tell us who you are. We shared a little bit about what you do, but just fill in the blanks for us.
Well, I started off in pharmacy in 2003. I am not a pharmacist. I was one of the people that were brought into the Corps of Pharmacists to start McFarland Pharmacy. And we had one of the partners was in pharmacy school at Sanford at the time. And so he met a girl who did not want to live in the town that we live in. And so he and his father were the ones that were putting this together. He talks about the rich uncle. Well, that's my rich uncle. So he had been in pharmacy for many years in Sneedville, and he was starting this pharmacy for my cousin who was about to graduate. And then when he decided he didn't want to be involved in that part of it, Mike Sigmund and I continued on with this process since 2003. And then in 2012, Mike decided that he was going to go into missions work, so I bought out the last partner. And we started off initially to be a compounding pharmacy, but we found our niche in long-term care, and we've done that now for the full time that we've been there. We started a DME company in 2004, which we sold in 2013. That was a good time to get out of that business. A lot of people look at that as an opportunity right now. I'd say hold off on that one. That's going to be a while before it comes back, probably. But at any rate, we continued on. We started after we merged our DME so that we could grow it, we started a uniform and shoe business that we could move into the space that the DME used to occupy. So just having things to fill the store was the important part, but that's been a good, successful tool for us because we got a visit to St. Mary's, and the volunteer services director there said that we could come in for the first uniform and shoe show that they had since they became Tenova Hospital. And she went on to say that she was interested in getting out of the gift store business. Asked us if we'd be interested in buying the gift stores. And I didn't think I had any interest in that whatsoever. But I asked her if we could put the uniform and shoe business in there and get the employee withholding program applied to that. And she said yes. And so we started considering the gift store at that point. And then with the gift stores, she said, we have a DME company of our own, so we can't bring your DME company in here, but we don't have a pharmacy. Would you be interested in doing that? And that was when it all suddenly made sense. So we've been operating their gift stores since January, and we started the first pharmacy last week in a retail operation to supplement our long-term care efforts. Because what we found, using MedCall and some of those other services, you don't get the best response from a Walgreens, CVS, or Rite Aid pharmacist when they really don't want to fill that 2-day prescription anyway. So we're trying to take it all back in-house and take our long-term care and supplement our urgent needs changes with the retail pharmacies.
Great. Ryan?
Hey, I'm Ryan Smith. I'm a P4, like Chase. My background in independent pharmacy, I guess I never worked in one until I started pharmacy school, and I didn't really have interest in ownership until our P2 year. Brian Barnhill taught me to go into the NCPA convention in San Diego, and under the premise of it's going to be free. So that's really why I went. Listening to the programs there and all the information that I got there, I really started to think about it. And since then, it's kind of developed into something that I'm really interested in, and that's what I want to do with my life. So we did the business plan this past year, and I'd encourage you guys to do that if you have the opportunity. That was a big help for me. And then, Chase and I kind of been on this little Cardinal ride. We went to their...
Hopefully a good one.
It was a good one. It was excellent. I have a little bit of independent pharmacy knowledge as far as ownership.
Very good. Very good. So I'm going to kind of get things warmed up with a question or two, but why don't you guys be thinking about, based on what you heard of each of them, what you want to ask. And if you want to ask one person in particular your question, that's perfectly fine. So why don't we start off? So you're at different stages of your pharmacy career, but tell me, if you knew then being the operative word, what you know now, maybe it was as a P1. If you knew then, what would you tell these folks in the room? Here's what I wish I would have known about independent pharmacy.
Well, I guess when I first got into pharmacy, really, I was pretty naive. I thought they were all about the same. I thought the whole goal is to get as many prescriptions out as you could, right? Maybe with, small business independent, you want to be, nice to people, get them to come back because you don't have the name. But I was really surprised going to all these conventions and talking to all these owners about like how they're so big on finding your niche or whatever, or something like that. They're always looking for that next level thing. They're always trying to bounce ideas off each other, and that's something that I wish I knew then was, as I met these other pharmacists, how I could apply their service to mine. That's what I started doing as I went on. I started thinking about how I'm going to manage and take my pharmacy to the next level. I wish back then I had asked all these other pharmacists what they were doing in the future to help take care of like these lower reimbursements.
What I wish I would have known as a P1 is just what ample resources and connections and networking are out there in independent pharmacies. So for those of you who have been at the NCPA meetings, I've shared before that I was not an NCPA member until my P5 year. at Ohio Northern and interned at independent pharmacies, and just for whatever reason, you know, I was involved in CPFI, I was involved in APHA and kept going with it. But NCPA is a really wonderful organization for you as students to go to the national convention, to get involved in TSSP here and TPA, and start to get to know those independent owners locally, nationally, because we have some really brilliant pharmacists out there who are doing really innovative things that are really exciting. So talk to those pharmacists, learn from their wisdom, learn from what was failures, learn from things that they thought would never work that have been immensely successful for their business. And you never know what's going to come from those. All of the opportunities that I've been given in my career, whether or not it was that first compounding job that I had, the second compounding job that I had, the residency that I ended up matching at, and coming here, every single step of the way there has been some sort of a connection from someone, an independent pharmacy, that has opened that door and opened that opportunity for me. So there's a really rich network that you just need to get out there and start to get to know people, and great opportunities will come available to you.
Great.
Well, I'm going to echo a little bit of what Josh and Scott said. Number one thing, what's your inventory? You're going to have to make sure you manage it and you turn it as many times as possible. So any of these tools, we're working with, we call it CIM, Cardinal Inventory Management, and we're trying to get that implemented. Now QS1 is having a little bit of a difficulty getting everything worked out, but it's about in place, and I think we've got our first good numbers about a month ago. And it's going to be very helpful in maintaining the number of turns that we have to do. You'll find that you can spend more money on your inventory setting on your shelf, and it limits what you can apply that reserve to. So you've got to really make sure that you're buying the right things and you're turning it as frequently as possible. And count on Cardinal for some of those things, because they can give you a lot of resources. Even going back to when I bought my partner out, Chad Sanders was a good help in trying to tell us what the options were, how to go about this process of buying. And that worked out as a very good resource for me. There were several different options we could have gone, but we found out the one that was best for us, and it really helped. But I can't say enough, what's your inventory?
Ryan.
Not that this would really help anybody in here out, but if I could go back and, to the beginning of college, I would have done some business classes in undergrad, because I didn't do any. And I think, we did the business plan, and Corey and I spent like 4 days straight without sleep trying to figure out how to make a balance sheet. And I think that some sort of training, formal training in that would have been beneficial. So if I could go back, I would do that. And kind of adding on to what Dr. Mossman said, I wish I would have been in NCPA and TPA from P1 year, because I didn't get involved until really about halfway through my P2 year, but I wish I would have been doing that since P1 year.
Great. What are your questions, everybody? Richard.
I have a question for you. How would you identify a market for a long-term care pharmacy, or what's really needed to go into that niche direction?
Yeah, well, as I said, we started off as a compounding pharmacy, and we just found that there was a small group home that needed our services in Morristown. And so we started off with that 8-man group home, and my background is sales, so they told us, well, we're going to stay with the current pharmacy that we're with, because they've got locations in Tazewell, and they can service both accounts. And I wasn't going to take no for an answer, so I went back to them and finally convinced them to stay with us on that one Morristown location. Well, they loved what we did. We went into packaging. We used Medicine on Time at the time. We had their 8 a.m.s packed together, their 12, 5s, 9s, all separated for them. And you've got to understand that in that marketplace, there's a lot of people that pass meds that probably don't have much. They don't have a lot of skill sets in passing meds. And they're sometimes waiver trained. Sometimes they're just people with a GED equivalency. And so if you can do something that makes it easier, that's what you do. And so we did, and then they liked us so well, they told some of their other friends, and we went to Knoxville and picked up a home, and that home got shut down by the state of Tennessee by the fire marshal, because they had 12 residents and they were licensed for 8. So they went everywhere and just spread out. And when they did, we went to them and said, well, they came to us first and said, do you know where these residents are? Because you have their prescriptions and you're the only common link to where they're going to be found. And we said, well, we'll help you find them if you'll help us by letting us speak at your state meetings. And we did, and it just blew up. It just really took off. So just finding a niche, I would emphasize that you just absolutely always have to listen to your customer. They will tell you what they want you to do. And if you'll listen, it's a lot less resistance. Does that answer your question?
I think so. I mean, it's kind of like, if you're going into these group homes, like nursing homes and things like that,
Yeah.
how would you compete against the people that they already have? Because they've got to have somebody.
Well, I think it's one of the beauties of being independent. If you're independent, you can cater to their needs more so than an Omni would. They're going to have rigid structure of what they are willing to do for them. You have to convince them that you can handle that and show them with, we grew it slowly, so we showed them with 1 to 2 and just kept on going. So I don't think there's a fast track answer to that question, but I think an independent pharmacy will have the care and concern that at the end of the day most of these customers want. Just listen to them.
Questions, more?
I got a question kind of direct toward you about partnerships. You got into the business through a partnership. Now you're a sole owner. Would you recommend to us to consider a partnership in the future, or kind of steer clear of that and
Well,
troubles that can come on?
okay, I'll give you the good and the bad on that, because I've had good and I've had bad partners. Well, the core, the first 4, we had no difficulty working together ever. And they were awesome. It's just some best friends. I can still, to this day, consider them the best friends. And so if you can find someone that that the integrity is there and the quality of that person is there, I would say that enter it with caution, but feel okay with that. Because sometimes more people can, you're just putting more legs on the project and you're getting more done because everybody's trying to get hopefully to the same goal. Define your goal before you get into it so you'll know where you want to go, and then that makes that a lot easier. Now on the DME side, we got involved because we wanted to expand. We had 250 oxygen patients at the time. We wanted to grow that market, and we merged with another company. And I didn't have as good of an experience with that as I did with the others. So know your partners. Make sure their integrity is there. And I would say if your goal is common, it's safe to do.
What is DME again?
Durable medical equipment.
Is that the one you sold?
Yes.
In 2013?
Yes, it is. And we sold it because a lot of changes coming down. What happened was competitive bidding came down through CMS. And when that happens, you put in a price as a bid to try to see if you want to cover the lives of these patients. And our bid was one that we could live with, but it was higher than a lot of the there were some people who bid very, very low in that competitive bid situation. So we did not get the bid, and I thought that was going to be the death knell of the whole thing. But it turned out to work in our favor because another company who did get the bid in the state of Florida wanted the company as a result of that because they needed people here. And it was hard to get enough people trained in time, and we had that workforce in place for them.
Now I have a question for you. For the jobs that you did at your compounding pharmacies, were they accredited by PCCA, or do you think it would be necessary? I guess you did some compounding too. Or would you want to explore that route if you're going to be big enough, I guess, or would you just do it if you were kind of compounding in between?
So it's actually PCAB accredited. PCCA you can just be a partner with and be a recognized pharmacy with. One of the pharmacies that I worked for was not PCAB accredited, and one of them was. So it's not something that I'd recommend right out of the gate because it is a very expensive process to go through. But if you start to grow and that's like solely what you want your pharmacy to do, I think it is something valuable to look at and to make sure that you have the SOPs and everything in place for that visit. The pharmacy that I worked for that did have it, they had 3 locations, and so they started with kind of their flagship location that was their big compounding hub and got that one accredited first. Especially if you're going to look at sterile compounding. I think it's something that's especially critical if you're going to make sterile compounding a huge business of yours, especially after the New England tragedy. It's something that a lot of legislation is looking at requiring, a lot of PBMs and stuff are looking at requiring it as well. So if you're starting small, I don't think that it's worth the investment. I think it would probably kill your business, to be quite honest. But as it grows, and especially, like I said, if you're looking at sterile, I think it's definitely something valuable for your marketing of your pharmacy.
Other questions?
Can I throw in one more comment on that?
Absolutely.
I think we did we didn't do PCCA's accreditation process, but we did do a accreditation process for durable medical equipment. And when we did that, it did make us a better company. And the reason why it did is it puts a format and structure together and gives you some guidelines that you can go by and are really, it's about accountability. And it made you more accountable. So I'm not opposed to accreditation in almost anything, but there is a significant cost in doing it.
And, sorry, I'm going to follow up with this. And I think in North Carolina, I'm not sure if you're familiar with it or not, I think you actually have to be certified. Yeah, you have to be licensed to do DME.
Yes.
Correct. Okay. So I guess you would have someone else do that for you, because you don't really need a pharmacist to do that, I would imagine. It could just be anybody.
You do not. I did a rotation at a pharmacy in Kentucky that they had a pretty good DME business going, and they had a certified technician who did all of their like shoe fitting and stuff for diabetic shoes.
We treated it as a sole business, separately operated. We didn't want the same people doing the same pieces because they were different. The regulations are so different and the requirements were so different. You can do diabetic shoes and that type of thing. It's a good fit for a pharmacy, but you still have to become accredited to do that with today's laws.
No, this is great. Keep going. Keep firing off questions.
It was, so when y'all were doing DME, were y'all doing just like diabetic shoes, or just, I mean, you said something about oxygen. I mean, you've got hospital beds, wheelchairs, things like that. Was that kind of, what did you think was the most, I'm going to say profitable, but because where I work now, nobody does DME.
Right.
I don't know anyone who does it and does it besides diabetic shoes. And it's kind of like, I get questions all the time, can you do my insurance for this? I'm like, well, no, it's technically a DME part of it. I don't know where to even tell you to go. So kind of like, where would you recommend, would you start with shoes, or would you want to go into hospital beds or oxygen?
So if you are kind of an independent pharmacy that you're looking to offer additional sort of niche services, just based on what I've seen, I would recommend starting with shoes. Because like Randy mentioned, there's a whole lot of competitive bidding, and there probably is someone in that market, but if it's rural, it may have not been subjected to competitive bid. But for diabetic shoes, if you get a prescription from a doctor, you can fill those for a patient, and you don't have to go through any sort of a competitive bid. You don't have to worry quite as much about regulations. And for Medicare patients, they will cover 1 pair of shoes per year, and then I think 3 inserts per year, if I remember correctly. And on shoes, you make about $100 from Medicare, so they're a pretty profitable thing for your pharmacy to get into. Beyond that, I don't really have a lot of experience, so I can't really speak to that. But diabetic shoes is definitely something that's profitable, and I think a little bit easier to get your feet wet into and still manage an independent pharmacy well.
But you will have to have your bonds. You have to have your bonds in place, and you will have to be accredited to even do diabetic shoes now. So you will have to go through that process if you do.
What does that process look like for certification?
It's We started off in diabetic shoes, and I became a pet orthist in order to be able to continue to do those diabetic shoes. But in the 11th hour, I had already gone and taken my training, but they reduced it down to a therapeutic shoe fitter certification program that took a little less time. Worked out good for us because it made us understand that there's a lot of pet orthic needs out there for people who overpronate and have other issues that are going on, plantar fasciitis, most common one. That opened up a new door for us. But we went through and we continued to expand, and we did everything toward the end on the durable medical equipment services, and there's a lot to know about that. And there's a lot that accreditation will help you with that process. But you're looking at about $30,000 investment just to get into the credentialing of your, by the time you take what fees and services there are to do the accreditation and the labor hours that you'll have to put into it, you're easily looking at a $30,000 investment. Do you guys agree on that, Josh, Scott?
Yeah, if you have to go through accreditation and all that, it takes a while to make your money back, but given the right circumstances, it can certainly be worth it.
Yeah, I think in all these cases, you have to look at the other stores in your area, right? So I work with, we have a customer up in DeKalb, Illinois. If you guys want to go on their website, it's Lehan Drug, Lehan. They are the destination for women's health. And he got up on stage at RBC, and they started with really for women who had had breast cancer. They were the certified fitter, and people came, and then word spread, and they added a mom and baby department, and now they've got skin. And they have what DJ, I think, would tell you, DJ Larson, who is a member of that family, it's a fourth generation pharmacy, would say is they have people who are out in those departments who are experts, and everybody who comes through that door is greeted and taken to one of those departments. So, they've grown over time, obviously, but knowing kind of what is an unmet need, and then developing the relationships. DJ spends a good amount of time talking with OBGYNs and cancer docs and all that. They know who he is, and they send patients over to Lehan. So that's just a example of what these niche, we talk about all these niche services. Usually it's, look at the health of the population, look at an unmet need, and then kind of play that out and see if it makes sense.
I want to follow up on what Eden just said. So anytime you're looking at doing some type of a clinical service at your pharmacy, there's two really important things you need to do. The first is that you always need to do a needs assessment, like she's talking about, looking out at your community and seeing what clinical health service is not currently being offered. So for example, I love immunizations. I love giving them, kind of staying up on what's required. It's something that I enjoy, kind of getting to sit down with the patient. A lot of times it leads to other things that they may need. But if I want to do an immunization service at my practice site right now at the charitable pharmacy, almost all my patients are probably going to need Hep B shots. They're going to need pneumococcal shots. Some may need shingle shots, but there's no way to get reimbursement for those right now. So I could build a really great immunization service and not going to do anything with it because there's nobody there to pay for it. So you always need to look and make sure that there's some sort of structure there for you to get reimbursed, to put all that time, energy, investment, especially if there's accreditation piece. And then the second part is, like Eden was also talking about, is you need to go to the physicians, the NPs, the PAs in your area that are doing whatever that service is related to and market to them and make sure that they know you, make sure that they trust you because again, we did HRT during my residency. So we could have an HRT consultation service, but if those physicians don't trust what we do and what we say and what we believe and what we practice under, we're not going to have any patients referred to us.
So why don't you get reimbursed?
Because there's no insurance to pay for the immunization. Do you think a patient who uses a charitable pharmacy is going to pay the $290-some that shingles cost?
But that's at the charitable. So you're talking about in general, yes, there is a reimbursement on immunizations, and actually they're one of the more profitable areas for a pharmacy. So if you look in that NCPA Digest, that is one of the top clinical services that independent pharmacies are adding: immunizations, compounding, delivery. But do you still have another thought or
Does it take
question
accreditation?
on immunizations?
No.
Not for immunizations.
What
no.
about, I went with my mom because she got us just sleep apnea and she was getting checked out with the CPAP, and the place had all this walkers and everything. Is that considered durable medical equipment?
It is.
And they had to get accreditation to sell that in that little store.
Yes, and if they have apnea therapy or oxygen therapy, then they're going to be required, at least at some point, to have a respiratory therapist on staff. And that's what we did. I think we wound up with having like 3 or 4 of them. And they have to go around and make sure that everything is working adequately. The CPAPs have to be set up by a respiratory therapist.
The 30,000 number you said, I mean, that includes, when you talk about labor hours, like the pharmacist salary, how much time you would spend away from.
Fortunately, in DME, we didn't really have any salaries as high as pharmacist salaries. Respiratory therapist was probably our highest additional cost. I had to think about that for a while, but I believe respiratory therapists were about the highest additional cost. But you still have, there's a lot of paperwork that has to be done and a lot of structure. So if you had a good business plan going into it and you incorporated a lot of those things into your business plan, you'd be far ahead of the curve when you open up a durable medical equipment. I think durable medical equipment is just going to go through a swing. I think there's been a lot of correction in that area right now, and I think it's corrected to a point where it's not as profitable as it should be to keep people doing that. So I think it'll swing back. I think so. I looked at the only non-compete that I had was in oxygen, and I looked at going back into it. But for right now, my decision was just to wait, and I'll see how that goes. And then if it gets to where it looks different, and I think that it will, I don't know that CMS can even go on in the manner that they're going right now. I don't feel that they can.
So to see.
Time will tell.
So what are y'all's thoughts on specialty pharmacy, kind of where that's going? Does Cardinal are they really involved with specialty pharmacy that much? Because I talked to someone about there was a residency program where it was based at a company and they mailed everybody across the country their specialty drugs and counseled them over the phone. So I didn't know if they're going to kind of take over or if, independent pharmacy can kind of fund.
Josh is ready to answer that one.
Yeah, so specialty pharmacy is odd because we were talking about this at dinner last night. PBMs see specialty pharmacy as one thing. In a lot of the PBM reimbursement contracts, for retail independents, we would say if you do more than X% of your business in specialty, it voids this contract and you'll now be paid on specialty rates for everything. There's some odd language in how PBMs understand specialty. Manufacturers have a different way that they understand specialty. Wholesalers and manufacturers are probably more aligned than anybody because it all affects distribution. But superseding it all is really, it's not its own class of trade. So it's not like acute, it's not like retail. It's not its own class of trade, so it sort of has blended in everywhere. And there's not a real distinct line. So some specialty manufacturers, a lot of specialty is closed distribution. So they've only partnered with maybe 12 to 15 mail order specialty pharmacies. That's the only people who can buy the product and dispense it. So there's a lot of specialty meds that a retail will have zero access to. And because of that, a wholesaler has zero access to. It's not open distribution. There are some, though, that are open distribution. Sovaldi is a great example, right? The acquisition price on Sovaldi is $25,000, $26,000 in cost. It's a high hurdle, right? Because that's just a monthly supply. The cost for one patient monthly supply. You got to get reimbursed on that. But remember when we talked about inventory management, have capital and operating capital. So if you have Sovaldi patients, right, you now are buying more than the average independent pharmacy is buying total, right? Because $25,000 times 10, you're at $250,000 in purchases just on that one drug. whereas the average store is buying $200,000, $190,000 a month. So it can really create chaos on your capital structure as an owner. And there's also a hurdle. Some things are going to require accreditation. PBMs are seeking more and more different accreditation levels. If the manufacturers don't exclude you, they're trying to find a way to exclude you from an accreditation standpoint. So like URAC accreditation, you guys heard of URAC accreditation for specialty. So we have a customer who is URAC accredited. And it goes back to what Randy said a minute ago about there's always the cost of being accredited, and then there's the incremental cost of being accredited. There's the fee you pay to play, but depending on how many changes that you have to make operationally to support what's required by accreditation, you can really create a big mess for yourself. Does it operationally make you better? Yeah. You got to determine if the hurdle and the cost associated with it is right. So, for example, in Randy's example, by the end of it, he spent $30,000. The actual accreditation piece was probably $2, $3, $4, $5. But by the time he laid everything out, he spent $30,000. We had a store who went for URAC accreditation. It was $50,000 outlay out front. That's what they had estimated. By the time they made all the changes and they added up the labor and all the things they had to do differently, they spent over $200,000 to be accredited for URAC. And one of those accreditations was changing their whole phone system. So to be URAC accredited, one of the requirements is you have to be able to track what time did somebody call in, if you transferred them, how long did that transfer happen, how many times were they transferred, if they were put on hold, how long were they on hold. So they had to buy a whole new phone system. They had a phone system. They had to throw it in the garbage. It didn't do any of that stuff. So now they had to go buy a whole other phone system. That's just one of the changes that they had to make. And then all the operational changes, particularly for specialty patients, is a lot of hands-on follow-up stuff required by the pharmacist, a lot of intervention kind of follow-up, babysitting the patient almost. And by the time all that circles out, who can really do that? So it precludes a lot of people from participating. So you've got accreditation that sort of filters who's going to play and who's not. You've got manufacturers who are going to either closed or open distribution. That's sort of keeping people out. And then just the cost to do it, the cost to buy the medicine regularly and routinely. Some stores just, some stores just can't financially weather the storm of having 12 Sovaldi patients. There's another one that just launched in the last month or two. I forget that drug name. But the acquisition on that is $32,000. And it's just a 30-day supply. Takes a lot of capital. You got to have a big piggy bank to wait out that 3 to 4 weeks to get reimbursed. And in that 3 weeks, you may have had to buy it back 4 or 5 times. So anyway, does that answer? Is there anything else? Okay.
I assume that Cardinal doesn't do the 10-month payback.
Might do it one time. That might be it. But, and even just, this is sort of like inside baseball, more than you asked for. But even the distribution agreements that the specialty manufacturers provide to the wholesalers. So if you think a long, long time ago, if you go into some older stores, you see they'll have little knickknacks and stuff sitting on the shelf from all the different pharmacy manufacturers. They'll have like an old bottle or something from Mallinckrodt. They'll have all this stuff where they used to buy direct. So pharmacies would have all these accounts set up with manufacturers, and they bought direct. They bought very little through a wholesale channel. All that changed, and the benefit to the manufacturers were they only had to ship to a few central locations, and then the wholesaler would distribute out all the medicine. That's what we did. Well, to do that, they pay the wholesaler a little bit of a fee. I'm going to pay you because it's saving me all the transportation, all the cost of getting this to, 23,000 independent pharmacies. We'll ship it to a few central places, and you guys distribute it. Well, they pay a distribution agreement a little bit on the backside for that, and that's part of how a pharmacy wholesaler makes up money. Well, the distribution agreements are so narrow and small on those specialty meds that there's also not a ton of money on the backside for a pharmacy or for a wholesaler. Generally speaking, a wholesaler makes money by selling generics, just like everybody else makes money. We need the margin off generics to cover the discounts that are given in brand. buy brand at a discount. You don't pay whack for brand. The pharmacy does. To subsidize those discounts, there's got to be generics. You can't subsidize the discount on a specialty. There's not enough generics a single store might buy to subsidize that discount. So when you get into the economics of pharmacy, specialty becomes real. It's real hard. It's real hard for anybody to wrap their arms around right now. I don't know if it'll be its own class of trade sometime, maybe, but it's almost its own class of trade by the way things are being hemmed in, and whether it's an accreditation offering or whether it's closed distribution, which really seems to be the way they're going to control it, a closed distribution network. It's its own animal. I know people get excited because they hear about the reimbursement that's available in specialty, but there's a huge hill you got to climb on capital structure to be able to afford to dispense specialty.
Thanks.
So
I would
that
also
went really long.
cautiously advise jumping into the specialty pool right now. My residency site was looking at it, was real sold on it, wanted to do it. But the PBM gig is on its way out the door. People are wise to their lack of transparency, some of the games that they've been playing. So I don't think we're ever going to completely fix it, but we're on the way to fixing it somewhat. So they're going to have to find a new way to continue to be $1 billion operation. And specialty is one of the things that I've seen stuff from NCPA about that PBMs are going to tighter regulate, and similar to what Josh was just saying, have all these stipulations that you have to meet and stuff, which if you're an independent, it's hard to meet a lot of that structure and that requirement, and the investment piece kind of gets in the way. And what I saw a lot from my independent was they wanted to do all of these niche things. They wanted to be an anti-coag center. They wanted to do diabetes education. They wanted to do HRT. And they were juggling too much to do anything too well. So kind of really look at what you're passionate about, and like I said, what your area needs. So especially when you're in a rural area, you guys could do probably a ton of smoking cessation, diabetes education as well, because there's reimbursement structures there that are ready for at least Medicare patients. And so it's a lot easier to incorporate that in your workflow, into a resident managing it, into a part-time clinical pharmacist, part-time dispensing versus this specialty arena that I think you might do a lot of investment for and then have that market pulled away from you in a few years.
The only other thing I would add on specialty is Cardinal has come up with a way. We do own a mail order specialty pharmacy that only does specialty drugs. So for those retailers that either it's a closed distribution because we have access to some things that are closed distribution through that mail order facility, or if it's open distribution, but the pharmacy's just not interested in buying a $26,000 item, right? What we offer to do is we will take the responsibility of the specialty med and leave the patient with you. So you still can keep all the maintenance scripts. You get to keep the scripts where you're going to make money. We'll take the burden of doing the mail order for that $26,000, $30,000 item. We'll do that. We'll take care of reimbursement on that. But you get to keep the patient, and that's a benefit. One, if you're struggling for capital or how you're going to pay for it or cash flow crunch, you're not trying to figure out how to afford that medicine routinely and then wait on the reimbursement. But you do get to keep the patient. So the alternative to that is if you said, I don't want to do the specialty med, the patient may leave the pharmacy altogether and go find somebody who will. Go take everything they'll order with their PBM, or just go down to another store who's willing to do that to pick up a patient. So our angle there is trying to keep the patient in your store where they're at, but we'll take the burden of the specialty med off of you. So it's an option. It's not mandatory for any of our customers, but it's something that we do offer for retail independents.
Great.
There's different ways to solve the problem.
I think that's a good way to, different ways to solve the problem. That's probably a good way to talk about. I mean, a lot of what you heard today may seem like obstacles and there's a lot of complexity, but I think all of us, Randy and all of us who spend time in independent pharmacies would just want you to know that it is still a very viable profession. You saw, you can make really good money doing this, and at Cardinal, we like to say that it's a noble profession. The thing, you impact lives, right? And I think some of you, obviously, that's important to you, and we need folks like you who are going to be out in the communities, a lot of them rural, and some of them urban, and helping people lead healthier lives. So I wanted to thank our panelists. We can give them maybe a quick round of applause. And thank you to Dr. Alexander, Dr. Gray, Dr. Mospan for allowing us to come in and do this today. Think of today as just kind of the beginning of a learning journey, right? It sounds corny, but you heard a lot today. You're going to want to go back and dig into some of these other things. And Cardinal certainly is happy to be here. Josh, Scott, who's here in town. Keep these relationships going. As Courtney mentioned, a lot of doors can be opened by somebody that you met somewhere along the road in your education or in your life, either inside or outside of school. So thank you for your time today, and have a great rest of your day.
There are some extra sandwiches if anybody wants to take one home or lunch dinner.